I've been wanting to interview Veronica Swift for a while. I met her at the JazzOpen in Stuttgart in Germany, where I was completely blown away by her performance and the way she mixes jazz, bebop, and rock. Now, I'd love you to be able to check out her music, so I've included some links below. I swear, you won't be disappointed. If you haven't heard of her yet, I'm convinced it's just a matter of time before she's a household name.
When you see a rock and roll musician, it's not like you can fake it till you make it. You either rock or you don't. About 99% of the people that come leave feeling, wow, I'm not what I expected, but it's better. The only way this kind of transgenre concept works for the audience and the musicians is if an element is like kind of a relay race, a musical or theatrical element is passed on through the next arrangement, whether it's the groove is the same, but everything else is different. Pain is the major reason for writing. This is I'm a fully formed, complicated human being with lots of facets to my pain, and my experiences have gone this way and that way. And I want to share all that with you guys and make it also objective and universal at the same time. I think the theatrics and the bigger the space, just the more we can fit of ourselves into a place.
Remember, you can become a member. There are 3 different types of membership of the channel. You can follow, and of course, you can just like this video. Every little bit helps. It allows me to continue with this podcast. Now, the membership link is below. The links to Veronica's music are below. Meet the extraordinary, talented Veronica Swift. First of all, Veronica Swift, welcome. I'm going to start. I know we've talked before, and I know we've talked a little bit about what we're going to talk today before.
Right.
But I do have to sort of go through some of it again. So I want to start with your childhood, and you were brought up on the road. So can you tell me a little bit about the experiences in your childhood with your father, the jazz pianist Hod O'Brien, and your mother, Stephanie Nakassian, when you were on the road with them?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Steve, I mean, it's just great. Thanks so much for having me today, because I know you and I spoke very briefly in Stuttgart, and it was just like click. Sometimes you meet people, it's like, oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. So I'm happy to get to, sit down with you. So yeah, a pretty unorthodox childhood compared to some. Of course, I did also go to, regular public school whenever my parents could get my grandparents to watch me. So I did have that as well, kind of best of both worlds going on. But on weekends or in the summer and time off from school, those months and weeks, my parents would take me with them. My parents weren't like super famous or anything. Jazz musicians are like punk rock musicians. You kind of just like DIY it, and so my parents would pack the car with all the gear, and I'd just kind of have to like, it was good training, for my adult touring life, because I had to learn how to sleep kind of in whatever position I could, and at whatever time I could find rest. I was, I found myself using like my dad's blazer coat as a blanket, and using a guitar amp as a pillow or something.
I mean, you say it's the best of both worlds, but in a sense, to me, if you have that sort of experience, when you go back to school, it creates a difference between you and the other children. And I just wondered whether you did feel different or you were treated differently from other children at that time.
Yeah, it particularly I mean, when you're elementary school, when you start to develop like second or third grade, you start to develop those thoughts of how, like the self-conscious kind of thoughts of how, oh, I'm different from everybody else. And I definitely had that. That was a super hard time for me. Also because I wasn't very academically inclined, although I was super inquisitive and I loved to learn. I just didn't learn this. A lot of artists have this problem where you just learn differently. And some of my teachers saw that as a good thing and tried to like, put me in I was either thought I was stupid or, I was in with gifted kids. So, and the other kids, so not that was enough to be kind of alienated by kids, but I was bullied as well because jazz music, and I was very proud of like my parents are jazz musicians and we're going jazz festivals, and now jazz has a much different tone with like hip hop being super like welcoming of the jazz and R&B community. But when I was in elementary school, jazz was uncool, man. it was like old people's music, and I was made fun of, for that. And it was, but I think I was grateful for my parents. They gave me a strong sense of self. And I just said, okay, well, I instead of, it definitely hurt, man, but I definitely fought back in my own way.
When you're on the road with your parents and you're
Yeah.
around other adults, what I've experienced with, well, sort of, I mean, I'm the what's it called, godparent of a child, and she's a single child, and her
Yeah.
parents have often then, other adults around when she was young, and not that many children at the beginning, and she grew up very quickly. She became an adult very quickly, and I just wonder whether that also your development as a child was sort of brushed over a little bit because you were always around adults, so you become a
Yeah.
grown up quicker.
It's no, the some in some ways, yes, but in other ways, I was surrounded by artistic adults that understood the necessity of preserving like imagination and like the type of artists that my parents were in circles with, artists like Bob Duro and um, Dave Liebman and other famous jazz musicians who are famous for like Bob Duro wrote Schoolhouse Rock, so he's a kid himself. And so I was very like I mean when I say I had the best of both worlds, I had did there were some elements where I did grow up very fast, but in other ways I preserved the childlike sense of wonder around the world. And being an only child, you kind of have to. And I grew up on a farm as well, so I had a lot of time to myself in exploring the farm and the woods. So you have to have a really unique kind of sense of imagination. To keep yourself busy and to keep your brain occupied. And I resorted to, before I was ever singing professionally. I mean, that I started to get up on stage with my parents at 9 years old, but way before that, I was relying on my imagination, as so many single children do, to keep me sane and not just occupied, but to keep me fulfilled, and socialized, so to speak, in my own
Can
way.
you can you explain that a bit? Just give me an example.
Yeah, I mean, stories. I would write my own stories and create my own universes. And I had like a kid has imaginary friends. But I was not just like in the story, but I was writing it as I was in it. So I had the imaginary friends, but I was also directing a film, or it was kind of putting on. At an early age, I started to develop those kinds of skills that a film director or a writer would have, and what I would need to create worlds, whether that's musically or. And I really, that's why in all interviews I refer to myself as a storyteller first, not a singer I mean, I'm definitely a performer as well. So, but using different mediums to tell stories, and that's what I owe everything in my childhood on the farm, or just kind of when my parents are on stage, I'm left to my own devices, sitting at the bar writing stories in the book, or exploring the green room, whatever it is, to yeah.
Apart from songs from the Great American Songbook or the jazz standards and things that your parents would have played on the road, what other music were you exposed to as a child?
And I heard bebop and Great American Songbook all the time, so that's why when I tell people that it wasn't an active career path that I was really thinking of pursuing, it just kind of because of my childhood and experiences and opportunities, that opportunity presented itself to, if you want a career in music, here's a very secure path. So that's why I chose it. But and it's my blood and my roots. But the music that I was just completely enthralled with, feeling the passion, love affairs of my life musically were first classical and Baroque music. My mom introduced me to Bach, of course. Like they say, having parents, introduce them to classical music and Bach and Mozart. And Bach, the Baroque music clicked for me because hearing like bebop lines as an early age, there's it's very line oriented, and vocalese, and bebop has a lot of harmonic sophistication. And so I think the Baroque music kind of felt like home in a way, but it was my own thing. And so I was singing Bach inventions and fugues at an early age, and that really developed my ear early. And then I found, of course, Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and all the bombastic composers that then paved the way for me to fall in love with metal and rock and roll. And like Queen, when I heard Queen, that was the click. the light bulb moment where all the worlds came together. And I said, wow, look at what you can create, in your own voice.
It's funny you should say that, because when I mentioned this to you before at the Jazz Open, but when I was a teenager, being a gay teenager, and I heard Bowie, and Bowie provided a world of belonging. So it wasn't
Yeah.
just his music, it was somehow this new world that he provided where I could feel safe and I could belong. So was Queen, the world of Queen, did that in a sense sum up that world of belonging then?
Musically speaking, I didn't have a sense of um still technically my world was so rooted, and I was surrounded by jazz industry people and the jazz musicians. That was my world. um I didn't necessarily like choose it. I would say I got like finding my tribe, so to speak, came later in life because I kind of saw the necessity of duty to my parents, and I felt, my parents didn't get very famous, and so if I can get famous, I can bring. I had a kind of head trip as a kid. I wanted, to bring a name to my parents that was worthy. Kind of like growing up in a royal family. There's the really strong sense of duty, and I kind of, for a while, by no fault of my parents, because they were super supportive, but just the nature of the world I was brought up in. There's such it can be very insular, and I was kind of crowned as like the savior of jazz, and I saw the necessity of duty, and I put my individual voice and my talents that I wanted, my dreams, on the shelf. So when you found your tribe through Bowie, I was searching for that and actually found it much later through actually in a band called the Dresden Dolls was what showed me that that was actually a world that I felt I could enter, because Queen was it was much older music, that the world was um not as a social environment but a musical environment that I was a part of, but the social context that made sense to me in my upbringing, as my development as a teenager into 2000 teens, was the band the Dresden Dolls.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of fits in with the idea of this transgenre
Yes,
theme that you have. But I also think Queen fits into that very well,
100%.
obviously, because Freddie
Yeah,
Mercury, being completely the outsider in that, particularly in that generation.
yeah.
So tell me a bit about what transgenre is for you, what it means and how it applies.
Yes, and I understand too that for a lot of people on either side of the spectrum, that so to speak, trans genre immediately, because of also the social context of our times, people immediately go to transgender issues, and that's also what I wanted to. I want people to go there in their minds when they hear the word transgenre, because it's a metaphor for what's going on socially, that we're being exposed now to this concept, um, old and young, that this whole idea of identity and sexuality is in fact a spectrum, and knowing where you fit on that spectrum, it fluctuates from moment to moment, and I think that's a beautiful thing about being human. Our experiences and our through life kind of dictate where we fit on that from day to day. And musically, that's how I choose to express this, because it makes perfect sense. I grew up, not to demonize or villainize jazz music, but that was kind of the traditional upbringing, right? That I had, that had it's strongly rooted in, even though the concepts of jazz are embracing of progressive and different ideas, the industry is so rooted in the traditions that they forget to embrace new ideas. So it's backwards in a way. And whenever you are somebody who comes from that tradition and then expresses something new, you're kind of written out of the script, so to speak, and you fight in a way. That's why we're soldiers, or transgenre soldiers. And the transgenre concept musically is not just about mashing up different styles of music. We try to go deeper than that, and we take genres like rock and roll and funk, to classical Italian bel canto opera and baroque music and jazz and bebop and bossa nova, and we take music from all times and try to connect through what is the combining element of these genres. So whether it's rhythmic or lyrical, or melodic concepts, we strip down to the base of that, And an example of that is the song "The Show Must Go On," which isn't on my album, where we take a Pagliacci aria, "Vesti la giubba," you know, the one that the clown he's singing, and there's a Nat King Cole arrangement of that aria, actually. So even Nat King Cole was doing what, you know, transgenre arrangements, and I do that arrangement with an English translation, but then I've discovered, of course, "The Show Must Go On" is a lyric in the translation, and I couldn't resist. I said, the Queen song, "The Show Must Go On," how can I incorporate this to create a new song, so to speak? And that's what transgenre is going to the source, which is the aria, and we analyze the melody and the lyric, and then I find pieces of other historical works of art, like "Show Must Go On" by Queen, and I incorporate it into the aria and thread it through, you know, like find the through line and connect, rather than just slapping a swing groove on an aria or something. You know, it's much more curated.
Yeah, I mean, you said that it's about investing in yourself, and that is tracing everything back to the source. You've talked
Yeah.
about the source in musical terms, but if we take, let's take "The Show Must Go On" with Freddie Mercury, recorded at the end of his life. And I think I read today that actually Brian May didn't actually think he would be able to do the vocal because he was so ill at that point and dying at that point that he wasn't sure that he would be able to get it out. But of course he did brilliantly. And I just wonder whether going back to the source is also going back to the source in terms of someone else's pain who's been involved in the music you're listening to, and therefore going back to the source of your own pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be the pain we experience in life, or we experience in listening to somebody's performance and interpretations, are how we are able to make these pieces, their songs that are, you know, some of them hundreds of years old, timeless, and able to connect like hundreds of years later, or in this case of Queen, decades later, because that pain is a universal. That is something, just like the human need to hear a good story. That's something that never changes throughout. You know, we're always going to feel pain and suffer, and then through that, hopefully, in feel joy of release of that and sharing of the trauma, bonding through that, and feeling like Freddie Mercury, who was not even alive when I was not alive on the same at the same time as this man. He died before I was born, but hearing his music, I feel like, you know, I definitely feel like we knew each other. It's amazing how art can do that, you know.
I think it's also down to the fact that, and maybe we can come with that with a specific example, but I think that when we hear something that resonates with us, particularly when we're young, because we're not actually thinking through why it resonates with us, later on we realize that there is some relationship. I'm not saying it's the same trauma at all, but there's some relationship between the trauma of the artist
Right.
and the trauma of the person listening to it. When I was, I think it was about 12 or 13, I was mad about Stevie Wonder's "Isn't She Lovely?" And I played it endlessly. And I only found out years later from Stevie Wonder's mother's book that his father was very violent. And when Stevie Wonder was very young, the father came home and would often assault the mother. And one night she stabbed his father and then packed the kids in the car and went off to Detroit. And "Isn't She Lovely" is a song from a father to a daughter, making sure that the daughter understands that the father loves her. My whole life was around feeling that my father never loved me. And
Yeah.
later on in life, I realized, wow, I connected with something on the same level. I mean, it's not always the same pain. It's what you actually put into your
Yeah.
psyche, the trauma that you put in.
Yeah.
So in that sense, could you say, or maybe, you know, talk about whether it's Dina Washington, whether it's Ella Fitzgerald, whether it's Queen, what have you looked at, what may be the relationship that you have in terms of your own trauma and experience to those songs or
I
those
mean,
artists?
of all the artists that I connect to and love dearly and are you know, deeply inspired by, there seems to be the common thread, whether it's, you know, they've experienced prejudice in some sort of way, whether it's sexual or racial or whatever, both. um and even though I definitely was turning a blind eye to some of the sexual prejudices that I was experiencing. I look back now and realize, oh, that was a moment there somebody was, I didn't realize it at the time. It's um when you're on a path, you kind of are so focused on your future that you forget to look at the present situation and analyze it objectively. But I definitely what I experienced that now listening to particularly the difference between Ella and Billy. I find it interesting to distinguish between the way they communicate a lyric and then through I use them as an example because they're so different, and I'm neither they're both so brilliant, and neither one is better or worse than the other.
Okay, first of all, tell me, how do they communicate a lyric?
Right.
What is the
So
difference? Yeah.
yes, and this is to connect to the point you were talking about. Um, you take Ella Fitzgerald, who has, of course, experienced her own set of trials and tribulations, and her difficulty with her upbringing, and also with her touring life being so rigorous and not being able to have a child with right, and so then, but you don't the way Ella sings a lyric, she lets she almost doesn't put herself into it in such a concrete way that oh, Ella experienced this by hearing the way she's singing it. She's delivering a lyric objectively and allows the listener to really make their own um project their own experience onto a lyric. It's almost like not a blank slate, but what's the word? It's almost like here's this, and she presents it in the most like full but yet it's totally up to you how you want to feel and experience the song, and that's something so hard to do. And Billy, on the other hand, you hear that pain so explicitly in these pieces, even some of the more joyous pieces, like you said, with "Isn't She Lovely?" Knowing that story, that there's so many layers now to that song that it's a shame that we can't include liner notes in albums anymore because people don't buy them. That I try to use Instagram as that platform to tell the story and the of a piece. But Billie Holiday, her expression is super subjective, right? And you're experiencing that with her. And if you've experienced the same kind of pain experience, then it's extremely you connect with her on that visceral level. So I think as an artist, we just have to find, and it changes from song to song, kind of where we fit on that spectrum. And that's what those two singers I use as prime examples. But you could go into any example. And I've learned how to, with some songs, get just personal enough. Whereas I also want to allow my audience to see their own, experience. Like, let's say I'm singing a song like "Confessions of the Other Woman," that not everybody's been the other woman or has experienced the other woman, so to speak. But that's such an obvious lyric that I choose songs that are really explicit like that and choose to sing them more objectively. So there's that dichotomy there. Because then it's like you're opening the door too much to, personal experience. And then with songs like that are more kind of that aren't as explicit lyrically, but have a little bit more up to the imagination, though that's where I find moments to really work on my arrangement to get really personal. Like, yeah, that for example, "Everybody Has the Right to Be Wrong," that song by Van Heusen. It's kind of tongue in cheek and very coy, but I choose that and "How Lovely to Be a Woman." I do my arrangement from "Bye Bye Birdie" of that super to the grueling experience of what it is to be a woman in what the ways the original arrangement has not expressed.
I mean, one song I was listening to today of yours, which was the Dina Washington, "This Bitter Earth," but then I was listening to your version and also Dina Washington's version, and it sort of struck me that there is, I mean, it's always with these amazing, Billie Holidays and Dina Washingtons and these amazing artists, they have very, very difficult and tragic lives, particularly of a particular era. And Dina Washington, she had a very difficult wife and a mother who was a bit overbearing and very, very religious. And and I just wondered, is there if you can say, is there a connection within something like that song because of the artist that connects to you?
I did have an overbearing mother actually, and but she's always been super supportive as well, and I go to her for advice all the time. But my mom has a lot of the kind of why not me? It could have been me, mentality, and that is one of the artists and performers' most dangerous demons to fight. I think, especially nowadays with social media, where you're bombarded constantly with everybody's showing their best self all the time, and everything's great. I've got gigs, and like you can't compare yourself to that, because all of that part of a lot of what we see on Instagram is a lie anyway. It's all photoshopped, and I that's why I try to like show the full spectrum of what's going on with everything on Instagram. But my mom definitely and I disagree on how to present our art in that way. She wants to, and there's a fine line to serve the audience and give the audience a, sense of, good times, everybody's happy, and then to also get real. And I've been a proponent of like, let's get real. And I think I've inspired my mom by leading by example to do the same. And now she's in a whole new phase of her career. So in a way, we're mending the wounds and healing each other from our past. And when I was a child, I really resented her for being this way of like, oh, nobody understands me and nobody appreciates me. And I fight that myself because of that was the example I had growing up. And um, didn't, it wasn't religious, so I don't connect with Dinah on the religious aspect, but of the overbearing part, where you have a mother who's, a helicopter mom, so to speak, where the emphasis was on academics all the time and pushing me to, and I have this confusion of, well, you're an artist and I'm an artist, so why are you keeping me from expressing artistically and practicing piano and writing songs? You're forcing me to go to this academic path, and it was just very confusing as a kid. And so I do connect on the overbearing aspect. But this Bitter Earth specifically, that song was a choice that my mom actually, she showed me that song. So that's the nice thing about having a mom who's in the same line of work as you, is she knows what songs to pick for me because she knows me. I was during the 2015 monk competition, and I was going to sing Darn That Dream for the final. I was in the finals. And then you remember there were Paris shootings had happened in 2015. And so I was responding and reacting in very real time kind of to what was happening globally. And then this sparked a whole snowball of events that I would then see throughout the next 10 years of how this song is tragically always relevant, and I think the fact that it always has been relevant since even when Dinah was singing it, talk about like, connecting through decades of separation. We are connecting on these similar tragic things that just keep happening, these patterns in society. So that was really why I chose to do that song. It's not so much my personal story, but more just like the pain of a nation, of a global pain that we share.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to become, I'm going to get the wrong word because I can't remember it, but you wanted to become like the savior of the family, the one who proved that, that your parents were great musicians, but they hadn't got the fame. So you wanted to get the fame to prove that the family name. I wonder whether that was a reaction to your mother, and maybe where your drive came from was actually this moment of like, I'm going to prove this because I'm going to choose my own path. I'm not going to be defined by someone else, whoever it is.
That's exactly what on a personal level, like, I try to make everything also universal, but yes, personally, transgenre is that statement. It is a personal statement saying, here, this is I am a fully formed, complicated human being with lots of facets to my pain, and my experiences have gone this way and that way. And I want to share all that with you guys and make it also objective and universal at the same time. So tall order, but I'm through. If you look at the lyrics of all the songs I sing, I drop little hints of what that was like as a kid, and also the complications of having um being in the same line of work as your parents. Now that's something that can be universal for a lot of people, not just artists. Think about all the kids out there that grow up with the lawyer parents or business. Their father and mother owns the business, and one day we're going to pass this on to you. So go to business school, get a degree, and you're going to work for the business and take it over. And there's an instant like path to success there and security that I think is very tempting for a lot of people. And jazz music was that, not music, the jazz industry, let me say. Jazz music is, I have my own pure experience and love for the music and the art form, but the industry, there was a clear path to success that every stage and was laid out, for me. And so it was a little bit of like, there's security and financial security there, as well as bringing the, glory to the name O'Brien and the Cassian family name. And yeah, I definitely think that's the wrong reason to go into anything, any business, any line of work. And the Dresden Dolls drummer, Brian Viglione, really kind of snapped me out of it in a way. Because, I had those moments of clarity with my rock project, Vera Icon, back in 2015. I had little moments where my brain was reacting to suppressing my, it's like with sexuality too. Like if you suppress it long enough, it's going to come back and fight and explode, and maybe sometimes an unhealthy way if you're not careful. So that's what happened musically for me, and that's why transgenre is the identity of where I am musically and who I am as a person, like just like a trans person, the identity of who they are. That Veronica Swift has now become for me, in a way, feels like a dead name. And I'm very conflicted. Yeah, and you're seeing with transgenre the processing of all this. And that's the stuff you can't say live. How do you say that to a brand new audience of thousands of people that are just getting to know you? So with this platform, I'm grateful to get to talk about it. Thank you, Steve.
Well, I mean, when you say it's a dead name, it's interesting because Christina Washington was, of course, Ruth Lee.
Ruth Lee.
Yeah, I have, Steve Blame is actually Stephen James. And if
James,
you
yeah.
invent a name, you invent a different personality. So Veronica Swift isn't your real name, it's a different personality then. So I think that's really interesting because you just said it's almost like you're at the point where now, and having an album called Veronica Swift also sort of suggests I'm where I want to be. I know who I am, even though we all progress in any case, but I know where I am right at this moment in time. Maybe I should put it in that way. And for me then, is the Veronica Swift part of you sort of fulfilled in that sense that you could say goodbye to it? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever fulfilled. I mean, I don't want to like
Yeah.
knock the people who feel that there is a sense of accomplishment, but if you talk to a lot of artists, and maybe you feel this way too as a writer, I don't know, maybe this is different for everybody, but I definitely never get that sense of closure and fulfillment. It's like when you lose somebody very dear to you, which I know you've had to experience your sense of loss in life too. And I had my childhood home burned down in a fire, and I lost my dad to cancer. We've all experienced heavy losses in life, and there's holes in your heart that you can mend the wound, but it's never fully healed. So I don't really ever get a sense of fulfillment. Like I've closed that chapter, there's always something open, but the, and there is a project on the horizon that has a new name that I'm looking very much forward to releasing and showing the world, which is my original rock music. And that's just another facet of my personality. It's not the only thing, just like Veronica Swift is not the only main thing, but the complicating thing also, Veronica Swift, for those who don't know, is my father's biological name. He was adopted by the O'Brien family, but I grew up Ronnie O'Brien that's my identity as a person. People call me Ronnie, my friends, but Veronica Swift was, at 9 years old, we found his Swift heritage, and I said, my mom's Nicassian, my dad's O'Brien. I want to distinguish myself as my own identity, but then Taylor Swift came along, and that now I'm constantly being compared to the other Swift, and it just comes with too much at this point in my life. And I'm not saying it's going to go away forever. I'm sure when I'm older and have put some time into showing people my original music, which will be called Dame, then I can go back to making Veronica Swift records in a healthy way. That's something I think, to be able to, like your future, once you've established yourself in from with your on your own terms, I think your future self can go back to your past self and kind of shake hands, and like an old adversary.
More coming up in a moment. But before that, just time for me to ask you again to take out a membership of the channel. There are 3 different types. And if you don't want to take a membership, I understand it costs money, but you can follow. That doesn't cost anything. And you can just like this video. Every little bit helps. All the links to Veronica Swift's music are below, and the link to the membership. Okay, let's get back to the interview with Veronica Swift. You mentioned Vera Icon, and which was a gothic rock opera about a homicidal nun, and it was an outlet really for your anger that your father was dying of cancer. So this period of your life must have been a very painful period, and it happened, I mean, to some people it happens when they're a lot younger, but it happened at a young age for you because you were doing your bachelor's degree at Miami, weren't you? In Miami School of Music, I think it was.
Yeah.
And for me, when my mum died, she was 93 and I was 59. So it was a much later event in life. Not that I think that makes any difference to the pain that you
Not
feel.
at all. It's always hard, no matter how old you are.
And you'd recorded with him the year before. So
Yeah.
when you listen to those songs, what does it today bring up for you, which is different from your feelings back then?
You know, so first of all, Vera Icon was like a reflection of that experience, and also the experience of being kind of in academia, which was constantly, I was being judged left and right, and music, even in a music school, I didn't fit in at all, and that was very difficult to finish that and get through that, and then the house burning down, and just I had another loss, who was someone who's like a brother to me, who passed away, my cousin. And so it was just like the anger of trying to be put into a box musically, and the anger of just everything else. And Vera Icon was the time that was like I was really getting into Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails and all the industrial, the dark gothic music that really spoke to me, and The Cure. And when my dad got sick, I sort of returned back to jazz. There was that was where I was following my dreams and expressing myself, and then, not to throw anybody under the bus here, but the fact that my dad got sick, and at the end of his life I wanted to connect with him more deeply, than because when you're a kid, and I had an older dad, he was 58 when I was born. When you're a kid, you're not thinking, at 16 years old, let me interview my parents and ask them about their experiences. It's just dad. And it wasn't until when he got sick that I started to, oh, maybe I should, ask him questions that I never thought to ask. And, and I got somewhere, but there were some things that we just didn't cover, before the end. And but we did connect. He didn't talk much, my dad. He was very quiet guy, reserved, not in the sense of keeping things from people and keeping things hidden. He just didn't know how to really communicate other than piano and music. That was his way of, and you can hear in his music, he has no shortage of vocabulary. So it's interesting. And some of us are exactly like our artistic selves. Some of us are the opposite. My dad was a case where he was the opposite, right? And so when I listen, I don't really listen too much to. I think it's not my time right now to listen to my music with him. It's still, even though it happened, he died 8 years ago, it feels still fresh. I have not quite been ready to go back, especially because I'm trying to, find myself in the present time as a songwriter, and and really focus on that part of my life and moving forward. And I think, like you said, at some point down the road, once we've really stepped into our role on our own terms, in our own voice, and expressing that, then it's time to go back and kind of fuse the two, which everyone in the industry has been so fixated on the nostalgia of your childhood with dad, and and I just, it feels wrong, I think, to, I'm still so young. I got to experience the present a little more. And so that's why I don't listen to the music we make together. And there was talk of me doing a record dedicating to his music. I think it's too early. I don't know. There's a pressure from the industry to do that, of course, because it's, jazz nostalgia and all that. It's very on brand, so to speak. But I don't think it's right for me. It doesn't feel, it feels forced if I do. So I will listen to my music with my dad eventually down the road. But I know that doesn't really answer your question in a satisfying way, but
Well, no, I mean, it does in some way as well. I mean, I did tell you the story of my mum, and that she left me with this amazing speech, which was, just before she died, about her vision, what she wanted for my life. And it started off
yeah,
with the sentence, "I want you to meet a man who is as kind to you as you have been to me." And it ended with
beautiful.
this amazing thing where she said, a totally sort of egoless idea, where she said, "And now I want you to go off and live your life and never think about me." And that took me 2 years before I could even tell someone. I told a
Wow.
therapist
Yeah.
2 years later that that's what she'd said to me. And so parents have the capability, and sometimes the situation doesn't allow it, or they're not going to necessarily do it, but they can leave you with something that's so impactful. And it doesn't have to be those sort of words. It can be, maybe in your father's case, how you will one day look back at his body of work and and see that that's what he gave you. You know what I mean? Then there's
Yeah.
something greater. Was he your protector?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he was. And especially because, mothers and daughters, just like fathers and sons, it's complicated. And I'm really trying hard not to, like, it's easy with a mother and a father to make it black and white, good and bad. If there's the evils of two, the rule of two, so to speak. But no, my mom, if I didn't have my mom around, oh, oopsie, sorry, my phone is freaking out, spam calls. If I didn't have my mom around, I wouldn't be ambitiously, driven to follow through and finish out what I set out to do. Because my dad was really the artistic type, and kind of, he didn't have a sense of time, so to speak, except on the piano. But my dad was like my safe place, and because my mom was at work at the school teaching, my dad was the stay-at-home dad, so to speak, who cooked and drove me to band practice and musical theater stuff. And and he would sit around and wait while I was at lessons. And he was kind of, yeah, like, in that way, even though we didn't really talk much except about space and music or philosophy, we didn't really talk about such secular things. But he did, he didn't, he was 2 generations older than me. How are we gonna connect? He grew up without the usage of a calculator, for goodness sakes. But and he was like my best friend in that way, so we were very close. And um you know there were times where I would just get so fed up with my mother, and he would kind of be the mediator. And so
Okay, I just want to get back to the trans genre idea, because of how it relates to the stage, how it relates to your choice of musicians, the
yeah,
relationship that's sort of forged between you and the audience, and also performance.
the selection of musicians is very it's a careful curation, because it's, as I said, transgenre, and the spectrum of music and the spectrum of where we fit on whether it's musically or sexually, whatever it is. Like I said, we're fluctuating every day. And as I grow and develop and discover what it means to tell my own story in my own words, that the transgenre approach has fluctuated as well. In the beginning, it was a lot more jazz centric. Makes sense from where I was coming from, just a straight ahead bebop kind of career. I had to be careful. I couldn't just do a full 180, right? To rock and roll. So I wanted to take people along on the journey as I was developing and discovering myself. And that goes for the musicians as well. In the beginning, it was pretty much all jazz musicians. And then I met Brian Viglione of the Dresden Dolls, and that changed everything. He was a rock drummer who comes from a super diverse background musically, and deeply rooted understanding of jazz. Like his hero is Elvin Jones, but he's a rock drummer in a band that I loved so much. And when Brian and I met, we discovered like this kind of like we had this kind of weird moment in time where like a space-time continuum has been disrupted, and I could go this way or that way, and everything kind of fell into place that I've got to follow this dream now or it's never. And Brian showed me that I have that all I need in here. And so then I was able to make decisions with clarity, but courageous decisions. So then I changed the musicians and switched them around, finding musicians who come from jazz backgrounds or rock backgrounds, but with the deeply rooted understanding of all genres. And that is something very difficult. A lot of the musicians come from music schools, of course. I my kind of criteria has been rock musicians who come from music school. That's been the criteria that's made sense for transgenre, because with a lot of jazz musicians, there's they can play anything and read anything, and the technical proficiency is there, but they can't play rock really. There's no bravado, and there's no, just that X factor to when you see a rock and roll musician, it's not like you can fake it till you make it. You either rock or you don't, and that's not something you can teach. And so that's why my scope is set for rock musicians who have that, but have been through schooling and have the technical proficiency and can play jazz and that have that harmonic understanding. So that's been an interesting lesson, and piece by piece as the music changes and gets more rock and roll and more theatrical, to find people like that.
There also seems to be, I obviously saw you at stage on the Jazz Open, which was really, truly amazing. And I just want to I'll come to something that really backs it up in a second. But when you with your musicians, there seems to be a sort of an underlying understanding without necessarily a direct communication. It was just very interesting to see that it was in a sense, everyone was within this unit and together on stage, and also this idea of forging a relationship with the audience, which is something that I've rarely seen so powerful in an artist, because you truly come alive on stage. It's incredible.
I go all over the world, perform for all kinds of people. I perform in all kinds of venues. You'll see me perform in rock and roll bars and jazz clubs, fancy schmancy PACs and theaters and festivals, arcs. It doesn't matter where we play. I do the same show. If I'm playing to 10 people, I play like I'm playing Wembley. And the reason why is because, one, I am naturally, that's the space that feels comfortable to me to inhabit that big theatrical person. That's not a put on. For some people it can be, but like you look at Freddie on and off the stage. That's who he was. He was a theatrical person. And David Bowie he had characters, and all these different characters expressed different parts of his personality. And I think the theatrics and the bigger the space, just the more we can fit of ourselves into a place. And when in regards to the audience, that's why I like to get in there as much as I can. I get out there to literally physically touch the hands of people, because I like to break that fourth wall, so to speak, or whatever, to bring that wall down, that I'm the performer and I stand up here and you're over there. That it's not two different planes to me. The more I can like physically connect, sometimes there's barricades and barriers, so it's hard to, but simple gestures like sitting down on the edge of the stage can make a huge difference like that. Or reaching out and grabbing someone's hand, bringing someone on the stage, even if security allows it. That's something that I like to do as well. Or toast, glass of wine or something with everybody else. Just, to show we're the more I can show people, because people come to my shows now, particularly older crowds who have known me from the past, they come with certain expectations. And about 99% of the people that come leave feeling, wow, I'm not what I expected, but it's better. You know what I mean? Then there's that 1% of people that go, oh, I just wanted to sing jazz. And it's like, I take that as a compliment, because it just means that they love my jazz singing. I'm like, thank you. Glad you like that part. But no, the audiences have not really been like a lot of journalists and people may think, because of the expectation that people leave feeling they've been jilted, or no, that's not how it goes. It, because of the gestures that I have, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much about this, but I think I humanize the artist. I think it's super important to do that. We are larger than life, and our artists have vessel from some unknown place, a plane. But I think the more we can humanize the art as well is the second we can connect and create a world, like you said, David Bowie did for you, create a world that everybody belongs.
How do you create an arc in your live shows to take the audience on some sort of journey?
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to achieve was to not make this like some kind of museum art show or lecture, because that could very easily with transgenre, because we're going through so many like styles and historic, to talk people through the arrangements can come across as lecture-y. And you've got to entertain people. You've got to be able to make it connect. So that's why I kind of try to let the music speak as much as I can rather than me. And that falls on the arrangements. And first, something's got to have a groove. You got to have a bop to it, plain and simple. Even a ballad, there's got to have a pulse and a rhythm and beat, like a heartbeat. And so I think if you arrange, and also writing, just like as you're a writer, that everything has to kind of have the exposition and the climax and the denouement. There's like three, and then other parts in the middle, but really there's the three elements that something has to have. And what do people remember the most is the beginning and the end. And so you have to have a strong beginning, a strong end, not just musically, but the narrative has to be strong as well. And this goes for creating an album and curating a live show. I pick the track listing, and I pick the song, the order very carefully. And you also have to look at keeping it, do I chunk songs together and kind of have like trios of the exposition is a 3-song kind of chunk, and then the climax has like this song that leads into the climax song, when then that leads into the denouement, which has these 3 songs. So you can look at groupings that can help, but also you want to keep the audience engaged, and that goes with like changing different styles and keeping, having different key changes to, like, think about, does a key change up or down heighten or lower the energy? So all these elements like it's like being a scientist in a way, but like you have to just try it out on the road. And we have done trial since 2021. We've been road testing this music. And if you look on the transgenre album, the Veronica Swift transgenre album, the first song is I Am What I Am, which is of course one of the queer and LGBTQ anthems in musical theater. And at the end, Don't Rain on My Parade, another musical theater anthem, Barbra Streisand. But the songs are done even though it's the same kind of bookended statement, the songs genres are done extremely. I Am What I Am is done straight ahead bebop, which is where I was coming from, which is what people expect. So we open with that. And it, like, people who know me from my jazz music, they're welcomed in. And then piece by piece, just like as I do in the show, an element from the last arrangement. The only way this kind of transgenre concept works for the audience and the musicians is if an element is like kind of a relay race, musical relay race, where a musical or theatrical element is passed on through the next arrangement, whether it's the groove is the same, but everything else is different. Like it's swing, and then it's swing is the next song, but then it's like completely different. So, or if it's the same theatrical experience, whether it's like White Rabbit and Dazed and Confused are both very trippy psychedelic songs, but we do White Rabbit completely different from the original, and we do Dazed and Confused like the original, so that allows the audience to be roped in. So you see there's all these threads that I'm like embroidering in a way, all these threads together to curate something that's very visceral, and people are able to experience transgenre on this level that it's like a theatrical experience, but it's also, they learn something too, hearing songs they've never heard before.
Can you create when you're on the road?
Well, it depends. If I'm on the road with my own music, with my own band, it's very it's not really a creative space. for me in that way, because that's when you're in the presentation mode, you know. And I've done the curating and the creation before to lead up to that moment. Now where this is the show 'em what you got. Kind of like, you know, when you're in the pitch, you know, at a business meeting, you know, there's not really, but there's time for improvisation in case someone asks you a question or something happens on stage. You got to be able to improvise and react in the moment. So that in a way is creative, but no, I can't write music, or it's very hard for me to write in that stage, you know, of development. But when I'm on the road with as a guest artist with other musicians, like when I sing with Chris Bodie, and I have a job to do as a kind of, I'm a featured guest, but it's like being a sideman. I just have a role and a job that I fulfill. Then that opens me up to be creative behind the scenes when I'm at the hotel or something. I have time off. I can leave that on the stage and compartmentalize a lot easier than on my own show.
Where does creation generally take place, and what are the things that you need around you to inspire you at that time?
It's super, super important to be surrounded in, just as you and I are talking about pain. A lot of the pain is the major reason for writing, right? You know, whether it's you use it to turn it into something joyful, a piece that's supposed to elicit joy, or whatever it is, the pain is always there to be the kind of spark that ignites this. But it's super important for me personally, and it's different for every artist. It's important that I surround myself with really supportive people. For the last couple of years, I've been involved with, you know, I've had a hard time finding the right management and the right booking agents, and, you know, all those elements that to develop the right team have, you know, it's been a very difficult puzzle to put together. And when you say, why aren't you more massive, that it's nothing to do with the artist a lot of the time, really. It's just right time, right place, and like, who's your team? And if you don't have the right team, it's like, you know, all pieces need to make this thing go. And the last couple of years has been a very challenging time. You know, on the one hand, it's like I'm really trying to show who I am, and I'm losing in the US, a lot of respect and work from the industry I was brought up in. And that has been extremely challenging to feel the support that I've had. The support system has just completely gone away. No one wants to take a chance, it feels, on me, in the industry side, you know, bookers and whatnot, whereas the audience is there for it. So it's nothing to do with, and also the complicated system of the gig economy right now. People aren't going out and buying tickets to shows, at least in the US. It's being very, even award-winning artists, you know, famous internationally renowned artists are selling 30% capacity. And it's just so challenging right now. I think it'll ease up after the election for sure. So battling the depression revolving around, like, I'm trying to build my career in a time where the gig economy just is completely flattening anybody, even, you know, established artists. And finding the right management. I've had managers that have just not really quite understood me, and that has been a huge barrier to my creativity. So as an artist, you've got to surround yourself with people who believe in you and really, you know, not feed your ego, but build you up and make you feel like you're in a safe space to create. Because otherwise, I haven't been able to write in over a year now, because I've been in this really depressed place of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So, but my creative burst happened 2 years ago, right when I moved to LA, and I had nothing but, you know, nothing but possibilities. So luckily I wrote about 40 songs, and I've got those to hold me until I can settle myself and get through this hard stage of, you know, and I think it's going to happen once I show the world Dame, that project Dame. A lot's going to happen once it, like, whew, we got new challenges, but all that's out of the way. Now here I am, take it or leave it. So that might make it a little easier to create from that healthy place.
Oh, well, I can't wait until that happens, because I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you in Stuttgart, and realized that I was in the presence of someone very special, very different, and incredibly talented. And, you know, I love talking to artists because the honesty can be incredible with some people, which it is, with you to talk about certain painful things is an incredible thing to do, but also to bring, to take their music into the world and to add to our creative culture and to give us, the audience, a part of them is such a great thing to do. And your music and your talent shines brightly. So Veronica Swift, just from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you.
I want to thank you for giving us this safe space to talk about everything. And, and I hope that the listeners who are listening or watching will, I know a lot of them may be discovering me for the first time. And I hope to take people on this journey, no matter what stage they kind of they're introduced to me at, whether it's from the jazz age or from this stage or future stages to come. Everybody has a voice that deserves to be heard, and you've given me a safe space to tell my story. So thank you.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.